Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Delighted to have this young man with us, Pat Day. Not much he hasn't done. The Hall of Fame jockey, 5 Preakness wins, 3 Belmont wins, Kentucky Derby win, 12 Breeders' Cup wins, and it goes on and on for the 4-time Eclipse Award winner, and Pat is gracious enough to join us now. Pat, good to catch up.
Well, good to be on your program. Kenny, how you been, bud?
I've been doing good. Earlier, we were talking with one Shug McGahee who was singing your praises, as many trainers have that worked with you, but he was talking about the bond that you and he have had for many years on the track and off the track.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, Shug's a stand-up guy, and it was a joy to. Well, it's a privilege and a pleasure to call him my friend. And it was a great experience riding for him. It was a blessing to be a part of the team. He brought him over ready to run and well placed, and gave me a loaded gun, if you would, which made my job that much more fun.
You always wondered, like, how much do you listen to a trainer when they're getting ready to, you're going to jump into the saddle here any moment now? How much information can they possibly give you that you already haven't studied a little bit, especially if it's the first time that you've been on that horse?
Well, I think Charlie Whittingham put it best. He said, good riders don't need instructions. Bad ones can't follow them. and I built a rapport with most of the trainers I rode with over time. And, if I'd never ridden a horse before, they would give me, what they deemed to be some idiosyncrasies or likes or dislikes or something that could help me in the course of the race. But, they didn't give me hard and fast instructions. Like, I want you to do this. I want you to do that. They had confidence in my ability to do what I deemed was necessary and right at the time. Ultimately to get the job done. And it was great to ride with people that had confidence in your ability and gave you the ball and let you run with it.
So that's what happens when you win over 8,800 victories. They know.
Well,
what can I possibly tell you?
The 8,800 winners came about because of their stellar ability to prepare the horse and get them in racing fit, and then to place them in the right company. The bottom line is the stock, Kenny. You know that. You got to be on the stock, and I'm not taking away from my part or the part that the trainers played, but I think we were all blessed with some runners. And as they say on the racetrack, a loaded gun is dangerous in anybody's hands. So, the first and most important ingredient was stock. Somebody asked me one time, they said, what's the key to your success? I said, simply capital STOCK, stock. I told my agents, I said, put me on a horse that's 10 lengths the best, and I'll win by a length and look good doing it.
Sage advice, Pat. You were known, though, too, for the great hands. There's just something about a jockey's hands that, it's not just jumping in the saddle and riding, as we know, that's been around the sport. But, friends of mine that are not familiar with the sport, I tell them, I say, the hands, it's like a good a receiver in football. They got the hands. You throw it, they can catch the ball somehow, where other guys can't. And, the horse, I guess, has a good communications with you, as with pretty much all the great jockeys. The way that you're able to control them and make the move when you needed to or not when you needed to.
Well, absolutely. I think there's what separates the upper level top tier riders from those directly below and further is an intuitiveness, and it's something that can't be taught. It can't be shared. It is something that you have or you don't. I think that there's a lot of really, really good riders. They're students of the game. They've learned it. They've studied the films, and they're able to make the right moves at the right time. But what separates them from the top tier is an intuitiveness, an ability to communicate with the horse, to sense and feel what's there, and then to know what moves to make. it's like a good running back. The play is called in the huddle. They line up, the ball is snapped, and the play falls apart. Well, you don't just blow the whistle and do it over. You've got to press on, and at that point, the running back gets the ball. He's not getting the blocking, but he starts cutting and running and ducking and diving, and you're watching. He's running up the field. The defender has him. He's reaching out. He's almost got his hand on him, and all of a sudden he cuts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the running back couldn't see that he was there, but there was an intuitiveness that sets the greats apart from the others. And I was so incredibly blessed, Kenny, as you know, with tremendous talent and ability, God-given talent, an ability to communicate with the horses, a willingness on their part to do what I wanted them to do, when I wanted them to do it, and an intuitiveness of knowing when to go for the hole, when to come around, when to wait. And it all played into subsequently over 8,800 victories.
And and looking back on a career that, you're an athlete. All jockeys are athletes, so I don't want to state the obvious here for those that are tuning in here. But you were like a great wrestler and an athlete in high school. And I know so a lot of the jockeys had that kind of background, because obviously you don't have high school jockey school, but you have other sports that you go into. And you're one of them that was just a great athlete who then would gravitate to horse racing after the high school career's over, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I came in a roundabout way, so to speak. I was involved with rodeos. I had initially in high school and directly out of high school, I was endeavoring to be a bull rider. I had a desire to be a professional bull rider and one day make it to the national finals. I wanted to be a world champion bull rider. Well, that had a limited amount of success, had a limited amount of ability to ride bulls. But in the course of my travels to rodeos, that's what got me introduced to people that knew about racing, and ultimately got me introduced to the great sport of horse racing, where it was pretty obvious right off that God had endowed me with tremendous talent and ability. Testimony of that, Kenny, is I started working on a farm in January of 1973. Mm-hmm. At the end of a month, I said, that's it, don't want to be a jockey, because they'd said, you need to be here for 2 to 3 years, then go to the racetrack and work for another year before you start riding. I didn't know what I was trying to become. I'd never been to the races, and I just couldn't see spending 2 or 3 years on the farm. Well, God had other plans, obviously. A few months later, I found myself on the racetrack in Arizona, and by midsummer, I told Carl Pugh, the man that I'd gone to work for that ultimately held my contract, I said, I want to start riding. And so he let me start getting on some of these horses in the afternoons. And July 29th of 1973, I won my first race.
Wow.
By January of 1974, 1 year after I'd been on the farm, I was the leading rider at Turf Paradise in Phoenix.
Phoenix, yeah.
That's just testimony to the incredible talent and ability that God had blessed me with. I didn't know what I was doing, didn't have a clue, but I was doing it and being successul at it.
Hey, and you didn't have to worry about going away from the hand or getting caught into the well.
You're right.
How about that?
Yeah, there's some bull riding terms. Yeah, you're familiar with that sport.
You did not know I called the PBR on NBC for 3 years, did you?
I think I did know that you was involved with that sport.
They stuck me. Well, they stuck me. I enjoyed it. We had fun, but I got it because I did horse racing. So they assumed I knew like every animal sport. So they said, what do you know about bull riding? I said, nothing. They said, don't worry, show up and you're going to work with Ty Murray and these experts. And I did. I had a lot of fun and learned a lot of things. And that was back in the little yellow jacket days, Pat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing I learned, they told me about, like a bull will be on his lead, like a horse. Mm-hmm. And a bull will change leads. And I started paying attention. And they do sometimes, in that 8
seconds.
They do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They change directions. Back in 69, 70, 71, 72, when I was trying to be a bull rider, we didn't have any bulls like Little Yellow Jacket. Not at my level. I mean, I was entrance level cowboy. And the bulls we had, they looked like looked like a child's play compared to the bulls these guys are riding. They're incredible athletes.
It's and did you wrestle? You wrestled in high school, didn't you?
I did.
Because I believe you're in a wrestling Hall of Fame out there.
but it's not for wrestling. I was in Outstanding American category, but it is in the Wrestling Hall of Fame in Oklahoma.
Yeah, well, see,
I wrestled in high school for 4 years, had a 77-7 record, went to state 3 times, was a state runner-up once, or state champion once as a junior, and a state runner-up as a sophomore and senior. Can be a bit misleading because I came from a very little school. I wrestled at the lowest weight category all 4 years, and subsequently I had a significant experience advantage over many of my opponents the last couple of years. But it was a great sport, taught me a lot of self-discipline, and certainly helped with coordination, upper body strength, and a lot of what helped me significantly in racing, as did the bull riding. Bull riding, I learned how to fall, Kenny. I believe that experience helped me significantly. As you know, accidents happen, falls occur.
Yeah.
You don't ride 40,000 races without hitting the ground a time or two.
Right.
And I was, because of my ability to fall that I acquired trying to ride bulls, I believe that it kept me from serious injury. When things would happen, I would just go with the flow. I would just tuck and roll and subsequently avoided serious injury throughout my entire career.
I'm talking about Hall of Fame jockey Pat Day. That's fascinating because I was trying to think back on significant injuries in your career. It's kind of running through my head right now. And you're talking about your ability to tuck and roll on a fall, which sounds like it's easy to do the way you say it. But as we know, you got that split second. I can't even imagine 1,100-pound horse is going out from under you or throwing you, and you've got only, like 4 or 5 more coming up behind you. That's one of the things that I always respect so much about jockeys is the danger level. I don't think necessarily you have to put that in the lead for a horse racing, but I do think that if they would promote that more a little bit, and kind of selling the athletes that jockeys are, in this MMA world and everything else right now, that gets people's attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, like I said, I rode over 40,000 races, 32-year career, and the worst injury was a broken collarbone that occurred actually after the race. My horse stumbled and I came off over his head and landed on my shoulder and broke my collarbone.
Wow.
But to ride that many races, that many years, and of course we had some spills in the midst of that. But to basically walk away from all of the spills that we were involved in and no broken arms, legs, backs, necks, just incredibly, incredibly fortunate.
Fortunate for people that got to see you on some great horses as well, like Lady Secret, Theatrical, Tabasco Cat. I'm going to awesome again. One named Easy Goer that I think was maybe a special horse for you.
Well, he was in my opinion, Kenny, he was the best horse I rode. Not head and shoulders over some of the others, the ones that you just mentioned, but he was extra special. If you've seen his race in the Gotham,
yeah,
and any of his other races, the races that he was not impressive in was times when he really didn't even show up, or the racetrack was playing against him, and 2 times 2-year-old here at Churchill Downs in the juvenile, Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and then in the Derby, stellar performance in the Preakness, even though we got beat. Rider error cost him, I believe, that race, but and then in the Breeders' Cup Classic, he got in the game that day, maybe an eighth of a mile. Just his head just wasn't there. But in the Gotham, when he was a fifth of a second off the world record, I never asked him. I never squeezed him.
Wow.
I didn't restrain him. I wasn't, throwing him down coming down the stretch, but I wasn't booting and scooting and asking him for his best. I was just riding with him. And I got back and Shug said, "Look at the clock." I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "That can't be right." It in no way it felt like we were going that fast. And had I realized it, I'd have been tempted to go ahead and squeeze him a little bit and surpass the record. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But in reality, the bottom line is they don't pay anymore if you set a world record or if you just win.
That's right.
But he was really special, and Suge done an outstanding job with him. And again, he gave me a loaded gun, and Easy Gore was up to the task. He was very, very special.
All-time leading winner at Churchill Downs at Keeneland. You were Mr. Churchill Downs. That 92 Derby. I know everybody always at Pat, when you go and win the Derby, you win everything else at Churchill. You know that. I don't know if it was fun or relief or whatever you felt back in 92 when you won with Lil E, the Roses.
Well, Kenny, that was when I look back over my 32-year career, over 8,800 victories. That's the one that stands out. Mm-hmm. Certainly the victories with Easy Gore and the other great horses I was able to ride, the Breeders' Cup races that we won, very special. And obviously many of those were worth significantly more money than the Derby. But the Derby is, that's the cornerstone of the American racing calendar.
Yeah.
And that is the race that everybody knows of. Everybody's familiar with. Everybody wants to win, wants to be a part of the winner. Whatever role you play, you want to be involved with a Kentucky Derby winner. You want to win the Kentucky Derby. And I was not unlike everybody else. But after I came to Christ in '84 and just relinquished control to the Lord, I wasn't happy when I didn't win. Mm-hmm. But I understood that I was doing the best that I could. If it was meant to be, it would come to be. It would come to pass. And but I kept believing that there was one out there somewhere with my name on it, and was so blessed to collaborate with Mr. Whiting, my dear friend, and Mr. Partee, the owner of Lil E, whom I'd had so much success with over the years, and then to collaborate with them and to win the Run for the Roses was extra special.
You mentioned the Breeders. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I ran second, as you know, 3 years in a row.
Right.
Come close, and I thought I knew what it would feel like, but it was well beyond my wildest imagination.
I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that moment. And I think he's 17-1. I said, Pat Dale never. Was he something like that? Was he?
Yeah, I think he was. 17. I think 17-1 was. I know he was a bit of a long shot.
Yeah, because
Arazi, of course, was a short price favorite.
That's right. Yeah.
He was 15 or 17-1. So.
Yeah, because I said Pat Dale never ride a short. He'll never ride a long shot at Churchill Downs. I remember. I tell you, because a lot of my friends would go Keeneland and Churchill and bet you they'd bet Pat Day every day. I said, when you should have bet him every day, you should bet him every day anyway, but especially in 1989 when you set the North American record winning 8 out of 9 at Arlington.
Oh, on a muddy, miserable racetrack, and the other horse was trained that I ran second in the other race, Kenny.
Yeah.
And the horse that won the race was trained by Lynn Whiting, my dear friend.
Lil E.T.'s trainer.
Yeah. No, what a phenomenal day that was. That was one of those days when everything was clicking. We were well mounted. Horses were responding. We were getting the breaks in the running of the races, and with the conditions being what they were, I didn't have time to even stop and enjoy it until after the fact. And then it was like, wow, what a phenomenal day.
Oh.
And of course, you know how us human beings are. In the car on the way home, I'm rerunning the race that I got beat in. Like, what did I do? What could I have done to, because we only got beat, I don't know, a nose or a short head.
Right.
I'm like, man, what could I think God was saying, man, you're a little greedy, aren't you? You want to win them all.
That's still an amazing day.
It's super day.
Oh, and you talk about like great races of significance, and people can debate what's the best race ever and all that, but one of the most significant races to me, not coincidentally, featured Mr. Pat Day, who won 12 Breeders' Cups, 4 of them the Classic, but he won the inaugural Classic in '84 aboard Wild Again before the NBC cameras. No one knew what this Breeders' Cup thing was going to be. Was it just rolling the dice? How was it going to work out? and to have such an exciting finish with a long shot like Wild again come in, and there's Pat squeezing, making the right moves, and getting to the line first. I think that sealed the deal that the Breeders' Cup certainly had a future at that stage when you crossed the line in that great, crazy finish of the first Classic.
Well, it was a storybook finish to a great day, and no doubt it certainly helped to kick off the Breeders' Cup and solidify its place in history, and it's continued on to be a great now 2 days. But I was in January that year, Kenny. Was when I come to Christ. I bent my knee on January 27th, 1984, in a hotel room in Miami. Invited Christ into my life. Got set free from the bondage of drugs and alcohol, and initially thought I was being called into the ministry. Mm-hmm. Was seriously considering leaving the racing industry and going into the ministry when I met the chaplain at the racetrack in Hot Springs, Arkansas, a dear friend of mine, Mike Spencer, and I shared with him my dilemma. He said, let's pray about it. We did. Through that, the Lord revealed to me that He had saved me to work within racing, not to leave it, take the talent and the ability and do the best that I could, all the while being open for opportunities or two opportunities to give Him the praise, the honor, and the glory. And I thought, wow, I can do this. I love racing. And so that was our focus. We wanted to do it all with all of our heart, do the best that we could, be open to opportunities to give Him the praise, the honor, and the glory. And of course, I initially thought, wow, the Derby, I'm going to win the Derby.
Yeah.
So I was all prepared. I had me a little mini sermon committed to memory, and I just knew I was going to win the Derby that year. And I was riding a horse called Van Landingham from Shug McGahee.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, we didn't win the race. God let me practice 8 more times before we won the victory in the Derby. But that fall, run around for the Breeders' Cup, as you know, it was at Hollywood Park, and I'd gone out a couple of days early. The race was on that Saturday, and I'd gone out on Wednesday, I believe. And I was in the jockey's room that afternoon. The overnight came in, and I'm looking down through there. At the time, I didn't have a mount in the Classic. And so I'm looking down through the entries and seeing what horses were in, where they're located, and who's on them. And I was on 2 or 3 other horses on the card. And so I got over to the Classic, and I seen Wild again, didn't have a rider. Wow. Well, I had won the New Orleans handicap on him, the Oakland handicap, and then I don't remember what happened, but we hadn't ridden him in, late in the year. And but I knew Vincent Timpany and the owners, Bill Allen and Ron Volkman and Terry Beal, and I said, man, let me go see if I can get a hold of Terry or Vincent and make the mount on this horse. And I went running to the front of the jocks room there at Hollywood Park, and I was going to have the clerk of scales call the announcer. That was before the days of cell phones, of course.
Right.
And I was going to have the clerk of scales to call the announcer and have him page for Vincent Timpany to call me in the jockey's room and try to make them out. And when I came in from the jockey's room, in from the outside, came Vincent Timpany and Bill Allen. I seen them, they seen me. I said, can I? And they said, would you?
Yeah.
And so we got together. I got the mount on Wild again. I blew him out on Friday morning, and he blew out in 36, was going well. But I'll be honest with you, I thought he was severely overmatched. You look at that lineup. I mean, it was a small, relatively small field, but it was an all-star cast. Gate Dancer, Precisionist, Desert Wine, Slew of Gold. I mean, come on. I was thinking we're probably 4th or 5th best.
Right.
And Slew of Gold was in the race with a horse called Muggety.
Yeah. That
was part of an entry with Terry Lipham. He was just supposed to set the pace, make sure that there was a realistic pace, so Slew of Gold could come and get the money. And when the doors opened, we broke, running down the racetrack. Muggety took a step out. I'm laying second. Wild again took a step out. I just intuitively took a hold of the left rein, just didn't even think about it. As soon as I moved my hands, Wild again locked onto the bridle. Off he went. We ran past Muggety in the middle of the first turn, doing everything wrong, running up the backside, ran the first 3 quarters in 10, and I'm trying to slow him down and keep him in. And Slew of Gold run to us at the top of the stretch, and I fully expected Wild again to just throw in the towel at that point. I mean, we'd run so hard, so fast. I said, we got nothing left.
Yeah.
He's got every reason to just throw in the towel at this point. Slew of Gold run up on the outside of him, and this horse dug in, Kenny, and tried as hard or harder than any horse I've ever been on before or since.
Wow.
Refused to let Slew of Gold go by him. It was almost as if he knew that his people had so much confidence in him,
right,
that they were willing to put up the $360,000 that they had to put up in order to make him eligible, and just refused to get beat. I mean, I've never been on a horse before or since that tried any harder than he did. Of course, we come to the finish line, and there was some bumping and jostling. Wild again's trying to get out. Slew of Gold's in the middle. Gate Dancer's on the outside, lugging in. And Slew of Gold got bounced around pretty good down there late. We go into the finish line. I thought I'd won, but I wasn't even sure.
Uh-huh.
We got back around to, got pulled up and got back around to the front side. My number was at the top of the leaderboard, but it's blinking. Gate Dancer was second. He was blinking. Slew of Gold's blinking. The whole board's blinking.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, my gosh,
Yeah.
And so I jumped off, went to the phone, talked to the stewards, shared with them, what I've deemed had happened in the course of the race. He was trying to get out in the stretch run. I was trying to hold him in, keep him running. And I wasn't sure who. I knew that there was some jostling, some bumping, but I didn't know who the culprit was. And I just left it in their hands. And ultimately, they came to the conclusion that Gate Dancer was the culprit. He was lugging in more than Wild again was coming out. And so they took him down and put Slew of Gold second. Gate Dancer was third. Now I get back on Wild again for the picture. And, of course, I got to be honest with you, God was the farthest thing from my mind at that moment. I was pretty keen on old Pat Day. We just won this $3 million race. And so as they're leading him in a circle, getting ready for the picture, and the crowd's clapping and carrying on. And so we got our back to the crowd, and the thought crossed my mind, look, when they turn and face the grandstand, take your helmet off and wave at the crowd. If the volume goes up, you'll know they're looking right at you.
Right.
We're going to play the crowd a little bit.
Yeah.
When we turned and faced the grandstand, I reached up to take my helmet off, and when my hand touched my helmet, the audible voice of God said, "It's not them." And I was overcome by the reality of what the Lord had enabled me to accomplish. And
yeah.
I just looked to the heavens and said, "Thank you, Jesus."
Yeah.
I knew that was a culmination of the talent and ability that the Lord had blessed me with, the opportunity to ride Wild again, him giving his absolute best, and subsequently winning the race. And I was just overcome, to say the least.
It's a great moment. Nobody will ever forget that moment. If you weren't there, and if you didn't watch it on NBC in the debut of the Breeders' Cup, people have Googled it and seen it on YouTube or whatever. It's still a great moment with Pat Day. Just as having you on today has been a great for us, Mr. Day. I always appreciate it. Well,
I appreciate the opportunity to renew some old acquaintances, take a trip down memory lane, and fond memories. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we'll definitely do it again, okay?
That sounds great, Kenny. Well, thank you so much. God bless you and your listeners, and have a great day.
All right. Thank you so much. The Hall of Fame, one of the all-time greats, Pat Day here. More coming up on the Horse Racing Show.